Kell Brook stops Mark Deluca in the 7th round. Considering the layoff that Brook has had, I think this was a decent performance. Deluca was tough in game, he came to fight, he had a lot of ambition and a lot of heart, and for the first 2 rounds, he actually gave Kell Brook some issues. And an argument could be made that he actually won the first 2 rounds. I know the commentary team weren't focusing on what Deluca was doing, but if you go and watch it back, you'll see he was doing quite a lot. He was landing some good body shots, some nice shots upstairs, moving around quite well. But in the 3rd round, Brook finally managed to find his timing and range. He pinned Mark Deluca down and he opened up, and he managed to do a tremendous amount of damage in a short space of time. Deluca went down, he got up and he fought on bravely for the rest of the fight while he was in there, but the writing was on the wall from that moment in the 3rd round when Brook finally managed to pin him down and did a hell of a lot of damage. I mean, literally before that combination, Mark Deluca was fresh-faced and full of beans. After that combination, he looked like he'd just done about 10 rounds with a prime Mike Tyson. So, yeah, Brook was in control from that moment. He steadily broke Mark Deluca down. Deluca was coming out with some wild swings here and there and trying to get Brook off of him, and he was still trying to win the fight as well as he could, but he understood from that moment that he had to be extra careful because Kell Brook could do him some serious damage. So he was still trying, but Brook slowly broke him down. Then in the 7th round, he stepped in with what can only be described as a power jab, and it snapped Mark Deluca's head around, spun his head around. Deluca went down pretty heavy, tried to get up, but couldn't beat the count. I think it was a KO, not a TKO, correct me if I'm wrong. But either way, he was done at that point. A good shot he stepped in with. It was, as I say, a power jab. But by that point, Deluca had been softened up. If that shot had landed in, let's say, the 1st round, he might have been able to take it better. But after taking all the punishment he had through those, 6.5 rounds, his resistance had been broken down by that point. So, yeah, good performance, I think, by Kell Brook. Now, some people are criticizing some of the technical things Brook did in there, struggled to find his timing and range in the first 2 rounds. He was lunging in with punches. His defense looked a little porous. But those, other than the timing, those flaws have always been there with Kell Brook. Kell Brook has never been a defensively slick fighter. You go back and look at the Carson Jones fights, got hit plenty. You go back and look at many of Kell Brook's fights. He's not a difficult guy to hit. Yeah, he's not the easiest guy to hit in the world, but if you're talking about elite level, Brook is not, an elite defensive boxer. Never has been. Always been very upright. This very rigid back that he's got, which is unusual for an Ingle fighter. So as Boxing Beats and Rhymes pointed out in his post-fight video, Brook relies on his legs for defense because his upper body movement is not very good. And as you get older, and especially if you're moving up in weight, you're going to lose some of that foot speed. Even more so if you've been out in the ring for 14 months, which is what we saw there with Kell Brook. He wasn't as fast as we've seen him in the past with his hands or with his feet. And again, the timing and range, a lot of that is going to be due to the layoff as well. So yeah, those flaws have always been there. And also when Kell Brook is lunging in with punches, he always has done that. In the Sean Porter fight, he was doing it. In the Errol Spence fight, he always lunges in and smothers his own work because Kell Brook has no inside game at all. Never has had. He's kind of similar to Vladimir Klitschko in that respect because everything is on the outside. He's got that hard jab like Vladimir Klitschko, the right hand down the pipe. But when it comes to inside, Brook just likes to jump on you and smother you and hold you. He doesn't really do much on the inside, same as Vladimir Klitschko. And at this age, that's just who Brook is. He's not going to change now. He's not all of a sudden going to develop an inside game. He's not all of a sudden going to become slick defensively. No, he is what he is at this point. So as far as where he should go moving forward, there's basically 2 camps. Some people say he should continue on at 154 and try and get a title shot there. And the Liam Smith fight is something people are talking about as well. And there's the other camp, which I'm in, which are a minority at this point, who think that Kell Brook should drop back down to 147. Now, it's going to be a gamble either way, because at 154, the guys are bigger and stronger, and therefore Kell Brook won't be able to rely on his strength as much as he did at welterweight, because he's always had these technical flaws, Kell Brook. But at 147, he was able to gloss over his technical flaws just by being bigger and stronger than a lot of the guys he fought. But at 154, he won't have that luxury. And those technical flaws will be exploited and exposed even more, I suspect, at the top level at super welterweight. But back down at welterweight, yeah, it's a gamble in terms of draining himself. But I just think having that physicality over a lot of his opponents is going to be a great advantage. And remember, if Errol Spence comes back at 147, we don't know if he's going to be the same. And that's a fight that Kell Brook is looking at. I mean, his promoter, Eddie Hearn, has been saying he'd like the Spence fight at 154, and I guess that's possible too. But, 147, I don't think should be ruled out. So that's my particular take on it. And Kell Brook, by the way, says that he's living the life for the first time in his career so far. Both him, Eddie Hearn, and his trainer, Dominic Ingle, have all been very candid and open in the lead up to this Deluca fight in saying that Brook hasn't been living the life for most of his career, including in the build up to some of his biggest fights. So now he's living the life. He said he made the weight for this Deluca fight very easy. Perhaps he'll find it easier making welterweight as well. That's just my take on it. It's a gamble either way. And another thing I have to mention is the fact that both 154 and 147 are basically owned by Al Haymon. Other than Terence Crawford at welterweight, I think all the 154 champions are with Haymon. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then you got Terence Crawford at welterweight. Yeah, both divisions are pretty much owned by Haymon. So he's probably going to have to get himself into a mandatory position, whichever weight division he decides to campaign in, because it's unlikely he's going to get a voluntary from anybody who's a Haymon fighter. Possibly Terence Crawford. There was talks about him fighting Crawford, I guess, last year, but somehow that didn't go anywhere. Maybe he could try and pursue that avenue again with Terence Crawford. It might be easier getting in there for a voluntary, because Crawford is looking for people to fight, right? So it might be easier trying to get a voluntary of Crawford rather than getting yourself into a mandatory position for a Haymon guy. And this is the same thing that happened, by the way, when Kell Brook was champion, because the only time he managed to get a Haymon fighter in the ring was in a mandatory situation, because he was mandatory for Sean Porter. That's how he got that fight. And then, of course, Errol Spence was mandatory for Brook. But in between that, he couldn't get any of the Haymon guys into the ring because Haymon likes to keep things in-house as much as possible. Yeah, just ask Terence Crawford about that. So, again, it will probably be a similar situation now for Kell Brook where, Haymon's probably not going to do him any favors. Now, some people have suggested maybe he should leave Eddie Hearn and join Al Haymon. Yeah, that's a possibility. But how is Al Haymon going to view Kell Brook? Is he going to view him as somebody who he wants to try and make a star out of? Is he going to treat Kell Brook like an A-side, or is he going to treat him like food for some of his other fighters and weight everything in their favor? And remember, another thing as well is that Haymon fighters tend to be very inactive, and Kell Brook wants to be active at this stage of his career. He doesn't want to have all these long layoffs outside the ring anymore. So is going to Haymon the right thing to do? He says he wants Eddie Hearn to get him out again in 12 weeks or whatever the case may be. We'll see how active Hearn can keep him. If Hearn isn't able to keep him active and isn't able to deliver, then maybe he could consider going to Haymon. So, we'll see what happens there. Now, with regards to his relationship with Eddie Hearn in general over the years, again, I did a recent video where I refuted this claim that Eddie Hearn destroyed Kell Brook's career. It's a silly claim from silly people who have a silly agenda, all very immature nonsense from these people. The reality is Kell Brook is the one to blame for the way his career has gone. Yeah, he could have fought Jesse Vargas in a unification at welterweight. He chose not to go through with that fight. And there are some people disputing this in my Facebook group and what have you. Well, let's just look at the facts here. This is an article, as you can see, from 2016 during the negotiations for Brook versus Vargas for that unification. And if you go down here, you'll see that Eddie Hearn confirms that Jesse Vargas signed his bout agreement. So Vargas signed for the fight. And the whole issue was money. Kell Brook wasn't happy with the money he was getting for the fight. It was small money, but it was big opportunity. because Kell Brook had been basically frozen out by the PBC guys. So he was waiting around for an opportunity to unify with somebody. That opportunity came and he didn't take it because he was getting small money. If he'd taken the fight and won and become unified IBF and WBO welterweight champion, it probably would have given him the kind of status in the division he was looking for and made it more difficult for the PBC guys to ignore him and only interact with him for mandatory situations. You know? Just imagine how different his career would have been if he would have taken the small money for the Vargas fight, the big opportunity that came with it. Yeah, he chose not to. He chose to go in a different direction. Again, some people are disputing this. Go back and check the facts. Some people are not doing this. Go back and check the facts. I mean, here's an article where they interviewed Jesse Vargas. And you see Vargas here says, they knew I wasn't going to agree to those terms. Once we sign the contract, we stick by it. And 2 days later, he gets the Triple G fight. So that's the story, people. Brook wasn't happy with the money he was getting for the Vargas fight. Then an opportunity came along to fight Golovkin, and he said, you know what, to hell with this Vargas fight for small money. Let me take the Golovkin fight for big money. That was Kell Brook's decision. Eddie Hearn never forced him into it. There are idiots out here almost suggesting that Hearn forced him into it because Hearn wanted to save a pay-per-view show. No, you can't force Kell Brook into anything. Brook, along with his trainer Dominic Ingle and Brook's dad, actually his stepdad, they all, as a team with Eddie Hearn, said, okay, we're going to go for the Golovkin fight rather than the Jesse Vargas fight. And to further prove what I'm saying is true, the Kell Brook-Gennady Golovkin fight was announced. You can see the date here, on July 8th, 2016. The Vargas-Pacquiao fight wasn't announced until August 2016. So Brook-Golovkin was announced a month before Vargas-Pacquiao. Vargas signed his end of the deal for the Brook fight. So all these people claiming Vargas pulled out and he wasn't serious about the fight, load of nonsense. Eddie Hearn admitted that Vargas signed for the fight. Where are people going with this? So it was Kell Brook's decision. Yes, small money against Vargas, but what was Brook doing in his career at that point? He wasn't some cash cow fighter that was the center of the division. No, he was a marginalized man who was fighting people like Frankie Gavin and Kevin Bizier, Jojo Dan. These are the type of fights he was getting. And again, people blame that on Hearn. Oh, Hearn didn't get him the big fights. Well, yeah, he didn't get him the big fights, but there's only so much you can do if Al Heyman wants to keep things in-house. Just ask Terence Crawford. There's only so much you can do. The only real alternative for Kell Brook at that point would have been to sign with Al Heyman, right? But if he was going to stay in the UK, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, they were limited in terms of what they could have done. Same way if he'd gone to the US and signed with Bob Arum, would have been limited in terms of what he could have done. Al Heyman likes to keep things in-house, particularly in the welterweight division, and he makes it very difficult for anybody outside of that PBC sphere who he perceives as a threat. He makes it very difficult for them to penetrate that sphere. In a mandatory situation, that can be your saving grace. But outside of that, none of them PBC guys are going to give Kell Brook a voluntary shot. They weren't back then in terms of voluntary unification, and they weren't now in terms of, or they aren't now, in terms of a voluntary shot. I mean, some of these people act like Eddie Hearn didn't want Kell Brook to have the big fights. This is how demented these people are. They think that Eddie Hearn didn't want Kell Brook to unify with anybody at welterweight. And he somehow kept him away from those fights or something and only wanted to put him in there against Golovkin. I mean, these people are demented. Eddie Hearn tried to make the Vargas fight. Kell Brook didn't like the money. It wasn't Eddie Hearn, it was Kell Brook. Obviously, Eddie Hearn had to go back to Bob Arum and say, okay, well, the money's not right and the pound is changing because of the, Brexit and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, we're going to have to move on because he didn't want to make it look like his fighter was ducking or whatever. He had to come up with some kind of excuse to tell Bob Arum. But Jesse Vargas obviously didn't believe that. And also, when it comes to the lifestyle that Kell Brook is living outside the ring, I mean, is he supposed to blame all that on Eddie Hearn? Is it Eddie Hearn's fault that Kell Brook wasn't living the right life outside the ring? Again, where are people going with this? It's all very illogical, nonsensical stuff that people use to bash Eddie Hearn at every opportunity. They think that's what makes them hardcore. That's what makes them a real boxing fan. No, it doesn't. It just makes you a donut with an agenda. That's all it makes you. Nothing hardcore about it. Not to say that Eddie Hearn is infallible. Of course, he can be criticized when it's reasonable and when it's logical. But outside of that, it's just a bunch of people with an agenda. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out. Hatman merch is now available. We got t-shirts, vests, hoodies, and more. Just click the link below. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.